Next talk we're having here, it's called Partly Cloudy IPA, joining Cloud VPMs to FreeIPA, and it will be done by Fraser Tweedale. Please welcome Fraser.
Thank you. So, today we will be discussing the problem of identity management for hosts in cloud environments. How to reduce the pain. An overview of the solution that we've developed in Red Hat and the team I work on, which is part of the identity management group. There'll be a nice live demo, and then you'll get the gory technical details, and finally a discussion of the gaps, possible future directions we can take this feature in, and opportunities for how you could use this software in your own environments. So yes, I'm in the identity management team at Red Hat. This project, the Podengo project, is the hard work of a small sub-team within the broader identity management group, and we were assisted by people from many other functions, including user experience, design, service delivery, the documentation team. And this was, for the identity management group, our first excursion out of the very traditional way of Red Hat delivering software for customers to take and run on their own machines to cloud services. So a bit of a new experience for us, even though this is where the bulk of the software industry has been for some time. This presentation itself is also a collaboration. My colleague Andre, our product owner, will be delivering a variant of this talk at FOSDEM in a couple of weeks. And we just got news yesterday as well that our quality engineer, who's based in India, will be delivering this topic also at DevConf India at the end of February. So thanks to those guys for their help with this presentation. If you have a basic understanding of cloud computing, cloud providers like AWS, and just an awareness that launching VMs that are operated by these cloud providers is a thing, then you'll probably be pretty comfortable with the content in this talk. And a basic understanding of identity management concepts, hosts and users and protocols like SSH, basic host-based access control concepts. Some knowledge of these things, if you have anything, you'll be pretty comfortable with the content in this talk. So what problem are we trying to solve? You've launched a VM. Now what? How do you authenticate to the machine? Most often, this is done by giving the machine a copy of your SSH public key when it gets launched so that you can log into it. This is okay. But then how does that machine, or the workloads on that machine, authenticate to other machines and services in your org or outside your org? And what happens if many users need to access that machine or the workloads running on that machine? And what happens when someone leaves your organization or you need to revoke access to that machine from one of your users? And how do you enforce the access policies that you want in your organization so that you can meet your security objectives? Objectives that in many cases are imposed by regulations that your company or your organization needs to adhere to. The different identity management approaches for machines in cloud environments include, well, just use SSH keys. Okay, if you're a small organization or a one-man show, that's actually fine, but it doesn't scale well. Then you have cable not reliable, no problem. Okay, if it drops and I haven't noticed, just holler. SSH certificates, they scale really well. Facebook, for example, is using SSH certificates pervasively in their operations, but this requires a special purpose public key infrastructure for the issuing and the management of the SSH certificates. There is privileged account management, or PAM, not the other PAM or the other PAM. It's a very unfortunately overloaded three-letter acronym, but privileged account management are systems where you store or have a centralised authority that can hand out privileged credentials to users on a short-term basis. These provide a lot of nice audit features, but they're often third-party solutions and often requiring subscriptions or licensing. Then you have your corporate IDM, and if you're in a medium to a large company, you'll certainly have this, often Active Directory. FreeIPA is the identity management system that we develop at Red Hat. It is a community project, and we do have outside contributors, but by and large it's driven by Red Hat. And we have the version of FreeIPA in RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is available as a base part of the RHEL subscription. So if you know what Active Directory is, then you essentially FreeIPA is like AD, but for Linux and Unix systems. So you can hook your cloud virtual machines into your corporate identity management, but you need to enroll the clients somehow, and you also need to ensure that they have access to your corporate IDM, which may be hosted not on a cloud, but inside your corporate firewall. And then there's corporate cloud-based identity management, which is Entra ID, formerly known as Azure AD, is the most prominent player in that space. However, the techniques for authenticating using these technologies to hosts, that is user login, are not yet mature. So we're going to tackle this problem by looking at the corporate IDM and enrolling the cloud VMs somehow into your corporate IDM systems. So FreeIPA is a centralized identity management system that lets you manage your users, hosts, services and access policies. It supports two-factor authentication, passkeys, smart card login using X509 certificates, SSH keys, but not SSH certificates, as well as external IDP support, so using external OpenID Connect providers to log into your systems that are enrolled in the FreeIPA domain. And yes, passwords also. We support cross-realm trusts with Active Directory, so that if you have a Unix environment or a Linux environment managed by FreeIPA, users in your corporate identity management, if that's Active Directory, can access those services. You establish a trust between these two domains. And as we're managing Linux systems, we also can define access policies for Linux-specific technologies like sudo and SELinux contexts. So this is FreeIPA. This is available in Fedora, in RHEL, and in Ubuntu, although it's not very actively maintained. It's sort of on a best effort approach for the Ubuntu and the Debian ecosystems. So what's the story about joining cloud virtual machines to a centralized identity management system today? Well, you bring up the virtual machine, you launch it from some image, and then typically you'll have to manually intervene to get that machine enrolled in your identity management system. So you'll need to perform some client installation procedure, provide a credential, an admin credential, or an OTP, a one-time credential, in order to enroll that machine. So it requires conveying sensitive credentials to that machine. You can use third-party config management systems like Ansible to do that, but then that introduces additional complexity and potentially additional cost. And however long it takes to execute this is time when that machine is either not available or is not enforcing these security policies that you actually want all of your machines to adhere to in your organisation. So there's this gap between when the machine comes alive and becomes accessible over the network to when this machine is able to recognise all of the identities in your organisation and enforce your access policies. So that's the gap that we're going to try and close. So the bottom line is we want to reduce the complexity and the cost of robust identity management in cloud environments. We want to let companies use their existing corporate IDM, or organisations, not just commercial companies, but using existing IDM deployments where their users and their services and policies are defined, to enable easy and safe transitions to cloud environments or hybrid cloud environments. And we do not want to sacrifice security in the name of convenience. So the solution is the Podengo project, and in the context of how we are using it at Red Hat, it's also Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console, but this is not a vendor pitch. I'll talk a bit about it to explain how we're actually using it, but I hope you will see the potential applications of the Podengo project beyond Red Hat's commercial offerings. So Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console is at console.redhat.com. It's a suite of hosted services to manage Red Hat environments. For RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we have Red Hat Insights, which gives you analytics and auditing, CVE tracking, all of that sort of thing for your enrolled RHEL machines. Subscription management, the inventory, building images, so you can actually define new workloads based on RHEL and then launch those workloads in your connected cloud providers. And beyond RHEL, there are also management features for other products like Ansible and OpenShift, but I won't be talking about them today. And we currently support AWS, Azure, Google Cloud and Oracle Cloud as the target cloud providers for launching workloads. In very broad strokes, there are three phases in the user experience or the customer experience for our solution. The first phase is you need to register your IPA deployment with Hybrid Cloud Console, and we developed a service running on Hybrid Cloud Console in order to do that. The second phase is that the users will need to build images that contain the client packages that will enable the clients to join the IDM server. And finally, yes, you launch those images, they become alive as virtual machines, and they get introduced to the IPA server via our hosted service and are able to securely enroll. Brief terminology guide here. Directory and domain services is the name of our registration service in Hybrid Cloud Console. Domain join is just our common name for the feature. So we're joining machines, VMs to the domain, we call it domain join, but you won't actually see that written anywhere in the experience as a string. That's just the name of the feature. IDM SVC is the internal name of the services that are running, and Podengo is the open source project that hosts all of the repos for the different parts of this solution, which are used to implement this experience. So the benefits of the domain join feature is that you're leveraging an existing identity and access management deployment. So you're joining the cloud VMs to your organization's existing system. The joining of the provisioned machines happens automatically and almost immediately upon those machines coming alive and connecting to Insights. So no further user intervention is required and no additional third-party products or services are required, and it's secure. Hybrid Cloud Console and our services don't see any credentials, any sensitive data whatsoever. The only data that our service sees is just general information about the domain, the IPA domain that's been registered. So, enough chin wagging, let's get to the fun stuff. So, first of all, I have an IPA server running. It is running in an AWS environment. So that's the host name, s2.dj1 domain join 1.phrase.id.au. And run IPA control status just to see, yes, this machine is a FreeIPA server. All the stuff is running. All right, so that's looking nice and healthy. Next, I will log into my hybrid cloud console or console.redhat.com account. Now, something important to note is that this service is currently visible only in preview mode, so it hasn't become generally available, so to speak. So it's there, anyone can use it, but you won't see it unless you have enabled preview mode. So we'll just go to the service search. There it is, directory and domain services. This is the interface, the front end to our service, the IDM SVC. And this is where we will register the FreeIPA deployment with Hybrid Cloud Console. All of this is associated to my organisation's account. So no other organisation will see it or will have access to the IDM server. So let's register the domain. Okay, first of all, it's saying we need to install the IPA HCC server package. That's already installed here. So yes, that's looking like we're good to go. So let's proceed to the next step. Okay, register your Red Hat IDM domain with Hybrid Cloud Console by running the following command on the IDM server. Great, so let's copy that. Let's run the command. Okay, we've got a summary of the domain information of this domain, which is to be registered. Shall we proceed? That's a yes. Okay, and it says, all right, we've successfully registered the domain. If we jump back to the registration wizard now, we can see that it had been polling the backend, and now it sees, yes, that registration step is complete. It's enabled us to proceed to the next step of the wizard. Here we can tweak the name and the description. This is purely just for the CRUD interface here. So we can just accept the defaults. This toggle here is kind of important because this governs whether the domain join feature is actually enabled for this domain. So we could register, but disable it temporarily, re-enable it later if we want to prevent the hosts from automatically joining the domain. In our case, we shall leave that enabled. A review of the information about the domain being registered. If we had additional servers in the topology for our IDM deployment, then they would appear here in this list. But as it's a demo, it's just a single server deployment. So let's finish. Okay, so it says the identity domain registration has been created and it's enabled. What's next? Well, if we want client VMs to be able to join the domain, we're going to need to build workload images that contain the client RPMs. So let's jump over to the images service. So for clarification, this experience, the registration service, is something that our team delivered. The images service is by a different team entirely. So I already have some image blueprints and some built images for the workload, but for the sake of the audience, let's create a new blueprint and see how we would go about defining this image. So we'll select AWS as the target environment. We will select the specific cloud account that we want to send the images to. In my case, there's only one registered. This is where the whole hybrid cloud concept comes in, because you can connect your cloud.redhat.com account with multiple cloud accounts, potentially in multiple different cloud providers. This is critical, the registration method. We do need this workload, or the VMs that are created from this image to automatically register and enable advanced capabilities. If we don't select this, it won't be able to connect to Insights, and it won't be able to connect to our service in order to facilitate the automatic join to the domain. So that's critical. Right, let's go next. We'll accept the defaults for compliance. I'm not sure why the UI has got this big gap at the moment, so sorry for that. File system, we accept the defaults. Content snapshot, no, just use the current state. Okay, we do need to enable EPEL. For now, our packages are not yet in RHEL, they're only in EPEL. And then we need to add the IPA HCC client package. So let's select that. That will also bring in IPA client as a dependency. However, we can also add it explicitly. IPA client. There it is. Okay, so we have selected IPA client and IPA HCC client to add to the image. Great, let's go next. We don't need to change anything there. I think we can just accept the defaults for the rest of it. Create the blueprint. So that defines the image blueprint. And from there we can build images. So the machinery somewhere behind the scenes is going to take these definitions, build the VM image for AWS, and copy that image into the default region, and from there you can copy it into additional regions that have been enabled for your account. However, that will take a few minutes, so for this demo we're going to use the client image that I already defined. However, its definition was the same as what you just saw. So let's actually launch this image now. So now we're on to phase 3. We've registered the IDM deployment. We have built an image. Now we're going to launch the image. We'll use T2 small. I'm going to select the domain join demo template. This is just to make sure that it lands in the same VPC network as where the IDM server is living, so that it can actually reach it. Now we'll select an SSH public key. However, this step is only necessary because the launch feature doesn't know about our feature yet, and so yeah, we're not actually going to connect to it using SSH, but we cannot skip this step, so we'll give it an SSH key. Okay, that's it. We'll launch the machine. In a moment the machine will have been created, and what we'll do is we'll copy the IP address and we'll switch back to a terminal, and we're going to log in as one of the users defined in this domain. So just for clarification, back on the IPA server now. Yep, okay, so I've got a Kerberos ticket here for, yeah, so for one of the accounts. If I do an IPA user find, we'll see the user accounts tickets expired, okay. Whoops. So we have a few user accounts here. One of these user accounts is EIDP, and this account is set up to use external IDP login with GitHub as the identity provider. So we're going to log in as EIDP. Let's see how far along this is. So the machine is up, SSHD is running. Okay, right now we get permission denied. This has happened because the auto registration machinery takes sometimes a couple of minutes to connect with Subscription Manager and with Insights. And the auto enrolment machinery will only trigger after that step is completed successfully. And there's no reason to trigger it sooner, because if we can't connect to Hybrid Cloud Console and authenticate using the Subscription Manager certificate, then, well, there's nothing to be done. So we necessarily have to wait a little bit for that step to complete. Hopefully now it has completed. Indeed, so now we're getting a link here to jump over to GitHub. And okay, remember this, 877A541. Okay, I'll log in as me. Right, 877A541, thank you. So this is using the OpenID Connect device workflow. And I'll authorize that. Oop, it wants my TOTP here, so let me just punch that in. Okay, and that's all done, so now we can jump back onto the client, just press enter to complete that login process. And we're in. And we even have our TGT, so from here we can log into another machine in the domain, so for example the server. So we can do SSH, s2.dj1 face. Okay, so we successfully logged in there to the server, and if I back out of there, run klist, you can see that we got the service ticket to log into the host there. So all of the Kerberos and identity management things are working. We got into this machine using the GitHub identity provider and FreeIPA's external IDP support. But the critical thing for this talk is that this machine was automatically joined to the domain after it came up. So that concludes the demo. Let's now jump back to the deck. Yeah, so how does this all work then? So the components here, we have on Hybrid Cloud Console, the service backend, and this is running in the console.redhat.com infrastructure. It has a database. This is where basically the CRUD API plus a few other bells and whistles are implemented, and the chosen language there was Golang. The front end, which is, you saw that's providing the registration wizard and that CRUD interface for managing the identity provider registrations. This is implemented using React, Patternfly, and TypeScript. The IPA HCC server plugin, which is installed on the IPA server. You didn't see the installation step, that wasn't part of the demo, but that's something that you install, and that plugin is implemented in Python. And the client side is just a Python script to and some systemd configuration to trigger the auto join behavior when the machine has successfully registered with Subscription Manager and Insights. So the Podengo project is where all of these components are developed and managed, and the name Podengo it's a dog breed with 3 non-interbred subbreeds, so a la Kerberos, the 3-headed hound of Hades, and also pod and go. So Podengo, we got pods, we're using Golang, so this was a nice idea that someone came up with to call the project Podengo. And every project needs a cute mascot, right? Architecture. Okay, so in this diagram, feel free to study this in more detail later. The link to the slides will be at the end of the talk. On the left-hand side is all the stuff running in Hybrid Cloud Console, the service side. The right-hand side is the customer's stuff, so the IPA server, the VMs that they're bringing up. The registration workflow is in red, the join workflow is in blue. So first step of the registration workflow is that the registration wizard requests that token, which was included in the command, the IPA HCC register command. So we request a token from the backend. We convey that token to the user through the user interface. The user then takes that registration command or the token and runs on the IPA server the IPA HCC register command. That sends a post request to the backend that provides the backend with all of the information about that domain. In particular, the critical information, what's the domains that it serves, the realm name, and information about the DNS names and the other configuration parameters of the servers in the topology, so that the VMs, so that our service can tell the VMs, hey, there's a domain you can join, and here's the information, so that you can actually know where to go. And the last part of the registration workflow is the REST service actually storing that information and enabling that domain for the auto join. For the join workflow, step 1 is the client machine comes alive, and after it has been registered with insights, it reaches out to our service and says, hey, I'm alive. Is there a domain I can join? And our service can respond, yes, there is, or maybe no, there isn't, but in this case, yes. And then the client machinery will send a request to the IPA HCC server plugin API on the IPA server to say, hey, I'm here. Hybrid Cloud Console, the IDM SVC service told me about you. Here is a signed authority to join. Can you please prepare for me to join? And it will go and do a host add, so it will define the host entry for that new VM that has just come alive and reported in. And after that step, the client can join using a standard IPA client install, but using the subscription manager certificate to authenticate. So it uses the Kerberos PK init protocol to get that initial TGT and then pull down the client key tab. If you don't know all the details about that, that's fine. Hopefully the general shape of the solution is reasonably clear. So the registration wizard, when it requests that token, I'm just saying the same things what I talked through in the diagram, aren't I? So the critical thing that I didn't mention is that the post request to complete the registration is authenticated by the subscription manager certificate that the client VM has acquired. The registration token itself is bound to the organization ID, to the domain type, and also the expiration time. So the token is only valid for, I think, 15 minutes is how we configured it currently. Again, don't worry about all of the details of this. Those who are crypto wonks like me can grab the slides later and look at it in a bit more detail. But one of the nice properties of this approach is that the tokens are ephemeral. So we don't need to store anything whatsoever on the server side until the server reports in with its post request that contains all of the domain information. And at that point, we can just store the lot. So there's nothing to be stored server side until everything is received and validated from the IPA server. But the domain ID is a UID which is derived from the registration token. So it is deterministically derived using UID v5. And as a result, the domain ID is known ahead of time, even though we're not storing anything server-side. And this enables the web interface in the registration wizard to poll the backend and ask, hey, has this registration been completed or not, in order to enable the user to proceed to the final steps of the registration. So, I think that's quite a nice property in terms of keeping the data nice and clean on the back end. The join workflow, yes, the image must include the IPA client and the IPA HCC client packages. And the auto join script fires, as I mentioned already, after the subscription manager registration has been completed. It queries a particular REST resource on the back end in order to ask it, is there a domain I can join? If so, it receives that domain information and an enrolment token, and then it will hit the IPA server, the IPA server can verify the token, create the host entry, and it's ready for the client to join. But looking at what is in that enrolment token in a bit more depth, that's a signed JSON web token with a bunch of the standard claims and some additional claims that include the organisation ID, the domain UID, the host inventory ID, and the fully qualified domain name of the machine that it's joining. The machine that is joining. We're able to periodically rotate these keys on the server side. I think we're set up to do that once a month at the moment in terms of our deployment on Hybrid Cloud Console. The IPA server, when it receives this join request, verifies the signature, verifies that the token isn't expired, and verifies that the domain UID and the organisation match its own understanding of which organisation and which organisation it's a part of and what its own domain UID is. And as long as that all matches, then it can create the new host entry, and the domain name will be the fully qualified domain name asserted in the token. The API is mostly boring CRUD stuff. The only special stuff is the tokens resource, which gets a registration token, and the host conf resource, which is when the client is asking the backend, do you have a domain for me to join? And also the signing keys resource, which is used by the IPA server and requested once a day or so to ensure that any signing key rotation that is taking place gets picked up by the IPA servers automatically. We have an open API spec, the link is there. Now, there are several things that have to be just right for all of this to work. The Hybrid Cloud Console, console.redhat.com that is, and the IPA server must be reachable from the cloud environment where you are launching your machines. So if your IPA server is in your corporate network, then you'll need to set up a VPC that is connected to your corporate network in order to enable those machines to actually talk. The DNS all needs to be set up correctly so that it can resolve the names, and routing and firewalls, of course, have to enable the traffic to get through. And there's a lot of protocols in use in FreeIPA, as in Active Directory and other identity management systems. And these include HTTP, LDAP, Kerberos, DNS, and so on. Also, Kerberos requires the clocks to be in sync. But yeah, I mean, most of the time it's DNS, right? Okay. So, status gaps and possible futures for this feature. So we are, as you've seen, in production on Hybrid Cloud Console, but in preview mode only. The RPMs are in Fedora and in Apple, and we are working to get them released in RHEL in the near future. We have published documentation, but we need to expand the documentation, and we would like to set up some onboarding guides specialised to each of the different cloud environments. During the next few months, so we only put this thing into production late last year, so we will spend a while collecting metrics and customer feedback in order to inform what are the next steps that we should take with the development of this experience. And right now, one significant limitation is you can only have one enabled domain per organisation. So you could register multiple, but if more than one is enabled at any given time, then the host conf resource will say, I don't know which one to send the clients to, so I'll just fail. So the big ideas about what could come next would be adding Active Directory support, and this would expand the solution to many more organisations. Potentially managing domain enrolments from the Insights inventory. So rather than domain join on launch, how about showing me a column in the inventory that says what domain these machines are part of, and giving them an option to enrol or unenrol them from a particular domain that has been registered with that organisation. And there's a lot more that we could do to assist users and customers with actually setting their cloud environments up. And we've even talked about, what if we could launch a VM in one of their clouds and actually probe if the IPA service that's been registered is reachable from that environment, and then we can record that information and know whether or not we should even offer a particular domain to be joined when you're launching machines from this environment versus that environment. Active Directory integration would look something like this. This is the diagram I showed you before. We'd need to interpose another RHEL machine in front of the Active Directory domain controller and run the enrolment agent there. So that's where the client VMs would report to after getting the enrolment token, and then the agent running on that machine would talk to AD and prepare the what's called the machine account. Same thing as a host entry in FreeIPA. And then that would facilitate the machine to then join. Smaller ideas include better integration into the image building experience, so that if the organisation has a domain registered, we could just show a checkbox to say, hey, do you want this machine to automatically join a domain, rather than having the users have to go and manually select the IPA HCC client package to add into the build. And as I mentioned, the limitation of one domain per org is a bit of a problem, and so we could start with some basic heuristics like matching the domain of a virtual machine to the registered deployments to see if there's a match, and if so, what we know which domain we should send the client to. So Image Builder, the service that runs Image Builder would just simply ask our backend service, hey, I'm in this org, and is there a domain or not? And based on that, we could show a checkbox or not. The grand vision is that eventually there'll be a single unified identity domain for the hosts that are managed and created through Hybrid Cloud Console, and the user accounts for the humans that are actually using Hybrid Cloud Console and bringing these machines up. There's a couple of different approaches, but the most promising one is called local KDC, and Alexander Bokovoy, one of our colleagues and a very smart dude, is doing a FOSDEM presentation on that in a couple of weeks, together with Andreas Schneider, who was one of the people who assisted in the early phase of the development of the domain join feature. So if you're curious about that, definitely check out that talk. That's in a couple of weeks. And for non-Insights applications of this, the architecture is not tightly bound to Hybrid Cloud Console, although in honesty the code kind of is a little bit at the moment. To use Podengo in other environments and other contexts, you would need to look at how the machines are authenticating to the IPA server and to whatever environment the IDM SVC services are running in. In Hybrid Cloud Console, we have a 3-scale proxy, and it's doing TLS certificate authentication using the subscription manager certificate. So you either need to do your own PKI things in order to grant certificates to all of your hosts when they come alive, or change the game a little bit and instead of using TLS certificate authentication, use a different mechanism. This would require changing the protocol between the client VM and the enrolment agent on the IPA server to convey an OTP token rather than using PKInit. So that's the end. We've got resources, links to official docs, links to the GitHub for the Podengo project, and I've talked about the external IDP support and also PKInit, and I have done talks on those topics in previous Everything Open conferences. Links are up there. We have the FreeIPA users mailing list if you want to find out more, or if you want to use the thing and you have any questions or struggles, that's a good place to ask questions, and the link to this deck is here. So thank you very much, and I don't know if there are time for any questions, but I'll certainly be around.